Really excited to have Kenny Ning with us today. We've worked with Kenny in the past, actually in another webinar and a wonderful blog post that he wrote about how to fix your project structure in Looker. So I encourage you to check that out if you have questions about what's the optimal way to set up views and explorers and organize your project within Looker. It's got a lot of wisdom there, and we've had many people, both our customers and beyond, adopt that structure and find success with it. So we were very excited to work with Kenny again, this time not so much on the topic of LookML, but on the topic of content, and specifically, how do we organize our content? How do we think about content as it's being developed, as it's being published, as it's being deprecated? What are the different stages of life that are relevant for our content? So Kenny's put together a really thoughtful system today, and I'm excited to hear what he has to say. So before he starts off, just going to encourage you one more time. If you haven't joined our Slack, there is a link in Zoom chat, which I will paste one more time if you've just joined. Join us over there in the channel for this specific webinar, and we'll be doing Q&A there after Kenny speaks. So I'm going to hand it over to Kenny. Thanks again for being here. Take it away.
All right. Thanks, Josh. So thanks all for coming to my talk called How to Fix Your Content Development Lifecycle in Looker. So before we jump in, I'm just going to introduce myself a little bit, give some context where I'm coming from. So I work as a freelance analytics engineer and I've been doing this freelance thing for the past 3 years or so. My core business is helping small, mid-sized startups set up their analytics technology, their analytics infrastructure. So most often, that includes the tools Looker and dbt. Looker in particular, I have deep experience over 5 years doing development and administration. Most notably, I was at a company called Better, and I was one of the founding data engineers and worked with scaling Looker from 0, bringing it on to eventually over 500 users by the time I left. So a lot of my Looker knowledge just comes from that experience, as well as freelancing across many other different industries. And outside of that, I've just been working in data and analytics over 9 years. I first started my career as a data scientist at Spotify and have gradually moved more into data engineering and analytics engineering now. So across that time, I think a lot of things have improved. One thing I think is still a huge headache is just making dashboards in Looker. And so I want to talk first about what I think is the biggest problem and workflow problem specifically when it comes to building dashboards in Looker. And then I'm going to share this proposed system that I've developed over the past years as a freelancer working with clients who also face this problem. And it's this kind of content dev staging prod lifecycle I'm going to show you. And then I'm going to just get a little bit more hands-on and show you a demo of how I would make a dashboard with this system in like a dev Looker instance. So jumping into the problem, I think one of the biggest problems with Looker dashboards is there's just no way to distinguish between something that's in progress and completed. Maybe another way to put this is, you know how there's like development mode for LookML, where it like isolates your LookML development versus like prod LookML. That doesn't exist for dashboards, right? There's just one copy of a dashboard, and it makes it really tough. So, and this creates a lot of problems. So let me give you an example. Let's say you're working in a company, and the company hires some contractor, like his name's Mark, to build a key metrics dashboard. They go in, things are going well, they're building it in progress. All of a sudden, that contractor gets terminated for, I don't know, for some reason, the budget's out or something. And they're left with this like dashboard called like test metrics. And there's like 1,000 tiles, half of them don't work. Some of them are duplicated and, you know, kind of an unfinished project. But, you know, your business users, they're mad tenacious. You know, they'll take that, they'll share it with everybody. They're going to use it. They're going to use what they can to get the numbers they need. All of a sudden, you're in a situation, you got another bad dashboard that's gone viral. Another one of these moments where you have something that, you know, the remaining analysts have no idea the context, where the numbers come from. It hasn't been validated. Are the numbers correct? And they're in this weird situation and kind of awful situation where they have to support this like hack week project for an increasingly large business audience that is also getting frustrated because they're seeing that all they know is they see this really, you know, popular dashboard. They know everybody uses it, and they can't understand why it's so hard to keep it working, right? In their mind, it's popular. It should have some certain level of support that analysts are not keeping up with. So everyone kind of loses in this situation. At the end of the day, it's just another classic example of expectation mismanagement. Because there's no way to distinguish between these in progress completed dashboards, it's hard to clarify the expectations of service that a particular dashboard has. There's no really framework of communication to have that conversation even, especially with something like Looker. So I think the solution to avoid this is to implement some kind of life cycle for dashboards. And here's what I've come up with in Looker to mimic a sort of development, staging, and production environment. So obviously the naming is inspired a lot by these environments we have in traditional engineering, right? But in Looker, we have to get a little bit more creative with what Looker offers us in terms of spaces. So the way my process is generally development is maps to your personal folder. Your staging environment is a shared folder. Oftentimes, if maybe you work on a team, there's a subfolder in here. That's like a product folder. That's your staging environment for your team. And then finally, a production environment here is a dashboard pinned to a board. So boards are, in my experience, a very underutilized feature of Looker. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why I chose boards for this production environment. And then optionally, converting these dashboards to LookML for further reliability. So I'm also going to talk about when it's a good idea to do that and when it's not for maybe like a prod plus kind of environment. So yeah, that's the high level. So I'm going to jump into the demo part and show you kind of what the workflow process looks like using this. So here is an example Looker setup. So let's say I'm just getting started. Let's say I'm a new analyst and I'm going to be building a new key metrics dashboard, and I want to follow this dev, staging, prod process. So let's, typically that starts by just going to an Explorer, maybe building a simple, let's just do like, this is like a sort of example IMDb movie data set. So let's just like count the number of movies by rating. And yeah, this is good enough for demo. So let's say you're like, this is good. Let's save this progress. So the first step is you want to save it to your development environment. So let's say as a new dashboard, and the development environment, as you recall, is your personal folder. So let's just call this like movies by rating. So this is in your dev folder. There's one important thing of this development environment. By default, as you can see, it's in my personal folder here. By default, let's check this out, personal folder. So by default, your personal folder in Looker for some reason is actually public. In other words, anybody can see this information. So I've already audited it, but most often than not, you're going to see like this all users group added as view to your personal folder. You have, that's not great because this is supposed to be like a dev space. You want to set this to be private so that people don't accidentally start using it and like, this bad dashboard goes viral situation. So there's two ways to do that. You can either just remove this group from your personal folder. The maybe more scalable way to do this is you should ask your Looker admin. They can do this globally on the user's top level folder just to remove that all users group. It's also worth mentioning if you have like a closed system, then this all users group doesn't exist. That's like a small percentage of instances, but in that case, you wouldn't need to do this. But that's one extra thing you have to do to make this truly like your personal folder, like a good dev environment. So this is nice. So like this is the dashboard I just made. It's in development. No one can really see it unless I want them to. Let's say I do some now iteration on it. I'm ready for it to get reviewed. In other words, to move it from development into staging. So the way I would do that is I would move this dashboard to the shared folder, like I mentioned. And the shared folder, let's just move to this finance subfolder. Let's say I work on the finance team. So it moves the folder there. As you can imagine, the difference between the shared folder environment, my folder, is this level of access. So let's take a look at this access. You can see here, it's a shared folder, so by definition, it has all users can see it. So now you can actually take this link, share it with your stakeholder, and get their feedback on the design, test the numbers. In this process, the most important part of staging is to document in writing. Like they love the feedback and whether it's actually like basically all the feedback into like a written place. So in code, we typically use like the pull request space for this. Obviously in dashboards, we don't really have that space. So there's a few options for compiling that information. My preferred is if you have like a ticketing system at work, you probably do. So like Jira, I like to make like a ticket per like dashboard. And then I actually do like to use Jira to collect all that information and feedback in one place, tag stakeholders. That being said, a lot of stakeholders are kind of averse to Jira. So another, I think, compromise is I'll just like send this board and then put it in like a public Slack channel and then ping the reviewer. It's important, again, if you do go Slack with this review process, let me back up a little. There's like this anti-pattern I see a lot where it's like when people want to review a dashboard, they just have like this like meeting with like the stakeholder and they like talk about it and like they talk about what could be improved, and it's kind of wishy-washy. And then no one takes notes and no one sends the action items. Like, don't do that, right? So like, even if, I mean, you can have that meeting, but it's really important you document the meeting and document like the review aspects. You know, you want to treat it like a pull request review. You want to have that log. So let's just, as a way to sort of simulate that, imagine like I want, you know, the spectacles team, or let's say Dermot is my stakeholder and I want him to review this. I'm going to put this in our webinar, how to fix your content, like our little channel for this talk. So I would write like, Dermot, can you review? And then ideally, like Dermot will take his time to review, put some thoughts in the thread. You want to wait till like, you know, yeah, like, so nice, Dermot, put like a +1. Let's assume, so like, let's say he's reviewed it, it's good to go. That's the staging process. Once I get this like approval, now I want to move this to production. So the last step to move this to production, like I said before, is to move it to a board. So I've made a board in advance for this talk, and I put some like fake stuff here. So, and then to pin this to a board or move it to, you can just go pin it here, finance. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about boards. So why boards instead of folders for organizing content? They're very underutilized in my opinion. Already, I think you can tell boards are just a way better way to organize information. The one big thing is you can actually curate the important dashboards and like group them in sections, like key metrics, add a little context about how they're related. Maybe this is like your vital signs, you know, passive kind of consumption stuff. Maybe you can put more exploratory dashboards on another section. So it just really allows you to be opinionated about what kind of information your stakeholders should be seeing. So like compare this to the folders view. So like a lot of people just like put stuff in a folder when they finish stuff. Like you can't really do much with this. Like it's just a list of stuff and you can only sort by name and favorited date, which are like, they don't tell you a lot about like the reliability of these dashboards. So already just for that reason, I think a board is really helpful, is better to organize just to allow you to be opinionated about what is like in production. And there's a few other like sort of obviously like UI and the grouping is really nice. You can also do things like pin the same dashboard to multiple boards. So maybe you have like a board per team and there's like a funnel dashboard that like the product team and the marketing team uses. You can pin it to both of those without having to duplicate the dashboard. That's something you can't do in folders. You can also pin links that are outside of Looker. So you can like pin arbitrary stuff. So this is a really nice feature too. Like I know a lot of companies that use more than Looker for like their BI. So maybe you can pin like a hex notebook here or something. So that's nice. It allows you to actually continue to use Looker as like your core, you know, source of truth and reporting while still acknowledging the reality that people have stuff outside of Looker. So that's boards. So highly recommended using boards for this prod environment. And also just like, of course, it's a board. So it looks visibly so different than a folder. So it also just really distinguishes this difference between production and staging. Like and you can start to do interesting things like communicate with stakeholders. If they find stuff through a board, there's this certain like level of expectation of performance. Like the data team's always going to support these at like some uptime threshold. But if a stakeholder, you can teach them, if they find something random in the folders, then it's like kind of a use it at your own risk situation. So it also just much more clearly communicates that. So lastly, in this demo, I'm also going to walk through, I mentioned briefly, there's this kind of prod plus feature where it's like for dashboards that have really high reliability requirements, I'd recommend converting that dashboard to a LookML dashboard before pinning it to the board. So I'm going to show you how to do that. But before I get into that, why would you want to do that? So we actually don't recommend doing that for every dashboard because a LookML dashboard is the big downside of it is it just introduces a lot of overhead, especially when it comes to, it's harder to edit. Like if there's a future change, you want to add a tile, change something, you have to like adjust the code as opposed to dragging and drop and changing it. It's just much harder to edit. So we only really recommend this process for dashboards that are, again, are like pretty stable, the design, and B, have really high reliability requirements. Why would you have a high reliability requirement for a dashboard? Maybe you're serving it to an external customer where it's like you really don't want it to be broken almost ever. Maybe it's a dashboard that like everybody at the company uses every day. It's just like the thing that, or maybe it's like this board deck dashboard that's just like really important. So in those cases, we do recommend using LookML dashboard. So I'm going to show you how you would do that. If you're not many people are super familiar with that process. So the first thing you get to make a LookML dashboard, it's pretty straightforward. So let's say we have our dashboard we just made here. It's a user drag and drop dashboard. So the first step is you want to get the LookML. So you do get LookML. This gives you the code, copy. Then we go to our project. So this project I've organized, this is, Josh mentioned it, we did a piece last year called How to Fix Your LookML Project, which is like this, I'm not going to go into too into detail. You can check out the post and the talk from last year, but the high level is like, it's this waterfall style where you specify like the raw view files in base. Standard is like your manual refinements of metrics, and then all your explorers in this logical folder. So this structure also works well with this like LookML dashboard thing. You can just basically make a dashboard subfolder in logical. And let's say we have this like, I already had this kind of built. You can copy that. You can paste that LookML code into this dashboard folder. And this should show up in the, once you do that, it will show up in this special LookML dashboards folder. So here's the dashboard, the LookML version. And then once you have this done and you merge it, then of course you can go back to the board and pin the LookML dashboard version. So notice one thing to call out with this approach is that converting it to a LookML dashboard actually creates a copy of the user-defined version. So now we have two versions of this dashboard. So if you do go down this approach, you have to find a graceful way to like wean people off of the old user-defined dashboard. The best way to do this is to use, if you watched last week's talk from Spectacles, around how to clean up old content. You can schedule content for deletion. That'd be a great way to manage this migration to the LookML version. So my last thing I'll say is like, why does LookML, what are the benefits of LookML dashboards? And why do we recommend them for like for dashboards with high reliability requirements? The best thing about it is because it's in code. Well, obviously there's like the sort of superficial things where it's like it's in code, so it's version controlled. So like if you need to revert to an old version, it's very easy to just like roll back and like revert a PR that's broken. That's really hard to do if you're like it's a user-defined dashboard, right? You have to like click your way through to the past version. Very annoying. So it helps you recover. Other than that, though, I think the most valuable thing of a LookML dashboard is it basically creates this kind of like column lineage with the rest of your project. So what do I mean by that? Because a LookML dashboard, you can see it refers to like the explorers in your project. If someone changes like the name of a column or an explorer in your project, you'll actually get alerted for that directly in like before you can even commit. So let me show you an example. So like, I think this is valid LookML right now. Yeah, so right now this is in working state. Let's say someone goes in here and changes this like column that I'm using, like 2. Okay, so it's going to create, we would expect, so it's going to create some error here, but look at this warning. So this is pretty cool. So this says there are some issues, unknown field, title, average rating, and dashboard element. So look at this. So it's actually telling us in the validation step that, oh, there's like a broken reference here. So this is really cool, I think, because again, you could maybe catch this and like if you're using a Spectacles content validation CI test, you might be able to catch this. But even if you catch it, you have to go to the content like validator step and do like a find and replace before or after it merges. So there's always going to be that tiny window because again, there's only one version of a dashboard. There's going to be this tiny window where that dashboard is going to be broken. So again, for cases that's like unacceptable. If you're maybe serving this to a client or something like that, you can see how this can be really powerful. You can change this, and then you can go to the dashboard LookML code, change the name of the column to actually, I think it was this one, right? To actually reflect the new name. So that's really powerful. That's why I think LookML dashboards give you that better reliability requirements. It gives you that lineage, and so you can catch those kind of reference errors sooner. So something to consider. All right, so that is the high level workflow of shipping a dashboard from dev, staging, prod. So in summary, what's the problem? Looker, there's no way to distinguish between in progress and completed, right? There's only one version of a dashboard. So the solution here is to leverage the existing folder and board, to leverage the forward and board structure that they have in Looker. So specifically, that means mapping, using your personal folder as a dev environment, using a shared folder as a staging environment to collect feedback and log that feedback in like Slack or Jira. And then finally, using a board as a production environment and pinning approved dashboards to a board with the optional step of converting that dashboard first to a LookML dashboard before pinning it to the board for like high reliability use cases like surveying that data to external customers. So again, you can, once you have this in place, you can do a lot of really cool things as a data team. You can start, like I mentioned, defining SLOs or service level, guarantees, like everything that's pinned to this board, we commit to supporting 99% uptime. There's always going to be a goalie. There's always going to be an incident process if there's an issue. So you can start to do really cool things. And in my experience, this is the right way to do this if you want to basically move away from firefighting and fully emerge as a proactive data team. So yeah, that's the idea. So I think we have some time. We can open up for questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Kenny. This was great. If nothing else, this was probably the best description of boards versus folders I've heard. I worked at Looker for 4 years, and I remember when we rolled out boards, there's a lot of confusion around it. And even I didn't really know how to position it to customers. So that's awesome. So I didn't introduce myself. My name is Dermot Ryan. I lead sales and partnerships here at Spectacles. And for the next few minutes, I will be playing host for the Q&A section. So quick reminder, I just dropped the link in the chat to the Slack channel, which is where we will handle all questions. So one question right off the bat here from Spencer is, can you go in reverse? So can you go from a LookML dashboard to a non-LookML dashboard? And I guess an add-on to that would be like, what would be some use cases for that as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you're going to have to do this if you want to like make edits to the LookML dashboard. So the way you would do that is you go to the LookML dashboard and you can copy the LookML dashboard to your personal. So let's say you want to like change this. You can see like copy LookML dashboard. And let's just say it was by rating copy. Might actually add that already. And when you copy it, it actually turns it back into a user-defined dashboard. And so this is like a common pattern I use, and then you can edit it using drag and drop. So this is actually a good segue to like, if you have to edit the LookML dashboard after the fact, this is the workflow I use to edit it. And then let's say I can, let's say I change the title or something like that. And then you change the title, and then you can go to get LookML copy this, then copy it back into this one, and it changes the code there. So that's what I found is the easiest way to make edits to the LookML dashboard personally. Yeah, makes sense. So yeah, in short, just copy the LookML to your personal folder, and it turns it back into a non-LookML one.
Awesome. See a couple folks typing here. Kenny, you mentioned LookML dashboards are really good for certain use cases. High reliability, you want to make sure that what is being presented is going to be accurate, error-free, etc. Any other use cases where, and obviously client-facing is a good one, perhaps executive, any use cases where you would recommend not using LookML dashboards? Yeah,
that's a good point. So like a good example is like, honestly, most cases it's not worth the headache. But a good example is like maybe you're doing like an A/B test analysis. That's like by definition narrow and like short-lived. It's not going to be around a lot. It's probably not worth, if it's going to be around for a month for the test, it's not worth going through this like extra process to turn it into a code-based dashboard. So I would be surprised if, honestly, like in practice, there's only really a very small percentage of dashboards that really need high reliability requirements that LookML dashboard, and then the pros of the LookML dashboard outweigh the cons of like the development process of it afterwards. So I would say probably the general guidance here is like probably just start without using it. And then once you hit your like first few errors or it's like once you get your first few incidents of like, you realize like an executive is like looking at this, then you invest the time to make the switch. There's no reason to make everything LookML dashboard, for instance, when you get started. So
awesome. A couple more questions here. One from Jake. So pretty much saying, hey, with boards, I found that linking to a Looker dashboard with preset filter values is a pain. I could add the link as a URL, but I'm not able to set the title. Is there a workaround for that?
oh, it's interesting. Linking to a look with preset filter values. You can have the link as a URL. By title, let me see what, so you're saying like if we have a filter here, I've never tried that. I can't answer that quickly now. I have to, but I can dig into it a little bit and answer that later, experiment with it. But I think the title, and by title, I guess maybe clarification question is like, you're saying the title like that shows up here and like, not entirely sure.
See Jake typing, so a second,
okay.
make some real-time feedback. While he does clarify that, well, if you click add link, there's a title field.
Oh, I see. So this is only for non-Looker content. If you're linking to a Looker dashboard, you just want to use the save content thing, and it will populate it. Everything like it will like give you these images and like the title thing. So these links I only use for things like, let's say I have like a Google Doc or something like that. Then I like paste the Google Doc link. Hopefully that answers your question.
Cool. And just so everybody's aware, we'll keep this channel live. We won't really archive it. So if you have questions in a couple days or whatnot, or for follow-up, we'll still be here. Another question is pretty much, is there a way to control what content users see in the Looker search? So Torsten saying specifically for his company and for ease of sharing content, they keep the private folders public, and pretty much wondering if there's a way to determine what content is prioritized in the Looker search.
So let's take a look. My general understandings is no, and I think it will also rank. So for instance, it won't show my private folder, I think. So let's just make sure. So I guess I want to make sure that my folder, since it's restricted, hopefully this like shouldn't show up, like plant life. I'll do that as a search. Yeah, this is a good use case though. I feel like, oh, it does show up. So that's really annoying, because then I feel like, but I'd be curious if someone else searched for that, maybe they wouldn't, that would be my guess, that it wouldn't show up in search, which I think is what I would want. So yeah, so the second part of your question, for easing of shared content, we have private folders public. So this is kind of touches on the point of the framework. I would not recommend that, because I think it, like, you want to make your private folders private, and if you want people to share, people should only be sharing content in the shared folder by definition. So if you follow this framework, it should remove the use case of like sharing private folder stuff. If you want to share it with somebody, you move it to the shared folder, and I think that'll also make search a lot better, because I'd imagine if you just make also all private folders public, search is going to be a mess. There's going to be like all these copies. Like it'd be equivalent to like, it's equivalent to like if you're a DBT user and you're searching like BigQuery's pane, and you search by table and you get every single dev person's copy of that table. That's what the experience would be like. So the workaround there is just, so in other words, I guess maybe the sort of addition to this is, if you do this process, search will look a lot better, because like you won't get a bunch of that private folder junk.
Makes sense. Awesome. Another question here from Anthony. When you go from staging in a shared folder to production in a board, the dashboard itself has to live in a folder somewhere. So two questions based off of that. First being, do you leave the dashboard living in the shared folder while it is in prod or on the board?
Yes, so that's right. So boards don't touch the file system at all. So, and I like to think another way to think about it is like the folder system is should be purely for managing permissions. It should manage access. Whereas like the boards just are like pointers to different parts of the file system. So like maybe a similar, so yeah, you'd leave it in the shared folder and then you pin stuff to the board. It doesn't affect where it lives. I think another maybe analogy there is like, I see this happening in databases a lot where people like, a folder kind of here maps to like a data set almost, where it's like it should be used for managing permissions. But data sets are not great for like organizing content in like BigQuery, for instance. So that's the other analogy, I think.
Awesome. Second question based off of that is, when you want to make a large change, like for instance, changing how a metric is defined or a viz is configured to an existing dashboard in production, what's your recommendation? And a follow-up here is like, do you make a copy of the production dashboard back to your personal folder and repeat the cycle and eventually replace the old production dashboard on the board, or what's the recommendation for?
That's a good, yeah, that's interesting. So let's talk about if it's a user-defined dashboard. The downside, I guess, I guess the downside of like making the copy is bad because it creates a new link. I would honestly just make the changes in place for the user-defined dashboard. So that's also maybe a downside of like having prod dashboards be user-defined, but that's probably what I would do. If you're using a LookML dashboard, you have a lot more flexibility there than you do the copy, because you also, when you make the copy of the LookML dashboard to your personal folder, make the changes, you can basically make a pull request and it deploys just immediately. So that's another advantage, arguably, of like LookML dashboards over a prod. Is easier to make changes to those prod dashboards, maybe in one narrow sense of the word. But yeah, for the user-defined, you just do it in place, I think.
Awesome. Another question from Jake is, which permissions determine which users are able to create boards? It seems like there's no granular control over who controls what is in prod.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's the permissions are going to be similar if you look at the shared screen. It's going to be similar to folders. So I think maybe I didn't talk about that much. I think the best way to do it would be whoever the owner of that board is like the only person who can edit, and then everyone else are viewers, and then they can't like delete stuff. So it's like one person curating the experience. If that makes sense. But again, this is also like another on the permissions thing being weird. It's important to remember, like, maybe not to make it too confusing, this permissions manages who can do stuff to the board, right? Who can remove and move content, I think, does not impact who can view the actual content, which is controlled by the folder, right? So like, again, like folders manage content access, then this permission pane will manage like the board design.
Awesome. Another question from Torsten here is essentially saying that they have a bunch of custom measures that are defined by non-developers, and was wondering what is best practices or your recommendation for flagging what metrics are data team supported, so that users know which content to trust, and specifically because once something's within a visualization, obviously the users don't know, whether the dimensions pulled for that visualization were quote unquote data team supported.
Yeah. This is a little, I want to say, out of scope of this, because like this is like getting into the sort of universe of like just like metrics layery stuff and like how to manage promotion of metrics from dev to prod. This is like, I think this is more on the dashboard side. I guess the one thing I'll say here, maybe the easiest thing is like custom measures should probably, like if you want this to be verified, it should probably not be, if you want this to be owned by the data team, it probably shouldn't be a custom measure, right? That's not version control. There's no, like if someone changes the name of a column, that custom measure just breaks without any alerting. So the first step you want to do to showing it's data team supported, and maybe an easy differentiator between like a metric being supported by the data team and what is like ad hoc and has use your own risk SLO, is if it's custom or if it's like in LookML. So I think that would be the first thing I would do. but yeah, definitely sort of there's a lot you could do. There's like probably a whole separate blog post about like promoting metrics, like in the metrics layer itself. So
Cool.
good questions. Yeah.
Yeah, back to the previous question about controlling permissions around who's creating boards. Jake responded saying, but if any users with Explorer access can create a board, an SDLC-esque lifestyle becomes difficult to manage. For instance, I may have to control X number of boards as an admin, but if any other user can create a board and all boards are considered prod, I don't have a good way to control the production layer. Pretty much if everybody is wild, just creating boards.
I see your question here, which is like I kind of misinterpreted that to create boards. Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think there's a way you can control that as an admin. I have noticed this as a problem where people just there's like a bunch of like a lot of the problems just like go into the test layer, like they just move to the board layer with like folders like test marketing D2 or whatever. Yeah, I think that's just a downside. It's just going to take some admin. There's going to be some kind of manual stuff you're going to have to do to prune that layer and just like be sort of be disciplined about it. I think you're right. I don't know if there's a good like admin way to do it.
I guess Looker feature request, if any
Looker
GC
feature request.
on a call, make that. All right, Anthony's chiming in to clarify permissions for boards versus folders. If I give a user view access to a board, but there's a dashboard on said board that they don't have view access to because of folder permissions, they won't be able to open the dashboard. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. In fact, I think I'm not sure the exact UI behavior. It might not even show up in the board. I can't remember exactly. Actually, I think what happens actually is if it'll show up and you click it and it just says like content not found or something. I think that's what happens, but that's correct.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So we're reaching close to the 45-minute mark here. We typically like to keep these wrapped up within then. We'll hang out for a few more minutes in the Slack channel if you have any follow-up questions. Otherwise, what I will do is in the Slack channel, I will link out to Kenny's blog post. I really recommend reading that. It's pretty much everything that we discussed here in written detail. And the other thing I'll highlight is at Spectacles, we are building features to help with the administration and management of Looker. One of them that's being beta tested today is a content cleanup tool set or functionality, helping companies identify what content is unused and helping to manage the deletion or deprecation process, including the communication of deletion with any content owners. And the second thing that we are working on is LookML cleanup, which gives companies visibility into what bits of LookML are being used or unused, and then will also help companies delete them. So really powerful in allowing you to understand, are we building the right things? What's actually being used? Where do we need to put our focus? And especially if you just drop all dimensions from a table within an Explorer initially, but then you want to prune that out, you're able to get usage statistics and all that there. So really exciting. Both of those, the content bit's in beta right now, and then the LookML bit will be in beta shortly. So if anybody has interest in either of those, ping me a DM on Slack. Otherwise, Kenny, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming. I would say if check out the blog post. Thanks for sharing that. I'm always, as I said, I'm a freelancer, so I'm always open to work and looking for work. If there's anything you want to talk about, you want to connect on things like analytics engineering, implementation, writing, like kind of the stuff I do for Spectacles, any kind of like content writing, or just general like strategic consulting about like both data strategy or just general like product strategy, feel free to add me on LinkedIn and just like leave a little note that you like found me through this webinar or something like that, and then we can connect through there.
Awesome. Well, Kenny, really appreciate you joining us. Again, you have the project folder blog, which is our most viewed and talked about blog anytime I talk to folks. So really appreciate you writing this one as well. and not only providing expertise, but an opinion on best practices. So
Yep. Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Thanks,
All right.
guys.
Have a good day, y'all.